clear to ship goods from Cincinnati to New York. Sure, it was 3 weeks this way, but so expensive to get over the mountains. It was much cheaper to go all the way around. And so there was trade, but had to be pretty high value products that were relatively inexpensive to ship. And so they go hand in hand, the transportation revolution and the industrial revolution. The first area we got to get to, there's 3 main areas, and it's the least important at first, were roads. Roads are really expensive to make, hard to maintain, and expensive. The most important road in this area, in this era, we have to mention, it's called the National Road. And it was started during the Jefferson administration. It's going to take 20 years. Roads were really hard to make. And it could only go in federal territory. It was unclear if the federal government could do things in states. It's going to be for the rest of the century that that question will be decided. And so it was a federal initiative, but these were all territories. It was called macadamized. So basically they would have to level it, grade it, have drainage on the road, and then they would take basically rocks and chip rocks up into tiny little pieces and lay them flat, and they keep rolling over with a, I want to say steamroller, free steamroller, or roller, and we press it together. And it's really durable, but took a long time to make. They would use this as a highway up until the 1970s. Now it's a national park, the road. And so people go and they hike or bike, and they don't let, well, for the most part, cars, except for Park Service cars. It's really cool. It's kind of amazing. But roads are really expensive to make. And unless they are weatherized, they'll fall apart in the first big storm. So there are a few roads, but for the most part, they're going to be private roads. A private road collects a toll. That's called a turnpike. And across Pennsylvania will be one of the first major turnpikes. This is near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is going to be a toll bridge, still functioning from 1790. The problem is with the toll roads, if they're private toll roads, where do they go? If a company makes a road and then charges a toll to pay for it, roads are really expensive. Are they going to go to small towns? Are they going to go to, let me throw a place out here, Montana? Where would they go? Where's that? Is that kind of what you said too? Yeah, New York, Boston, yeah, only big towns. If private made roads will only go where they can make money. Only go where they make money. So roads by definition are going to be very, very, very limited unless the government comes in and subsidizes it. We see the same with the airports. Nobody would ever fly into Helena. They would never build an airport unless the federal government came in and built an airport, and the federal government subsidizes airfares. The federal government actually gives the airlines money to come into Helena. So that's one of the reasons why, and it's still very more expensive than flying out of big cities. But so the same thing happens to this day. And so, Earth Bridge. So I was on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and I literally just paid a toll, and it was $2.50. Now it's like $5. This is about 20 years ago. Went out the road. There's a little park. I went to see this bridge because it's the first still usable freestanding bridge in the United States. The first one that still stands. And it was really cool, this neat little park. I'm glad I went there. And they got back on, and I remember I had to pay a $5 toll to get back on the highway. So it was relatively expensive. I mean, it adds up to go get this picture of the bridge. It was really cool, but still, as done by wagons. Wagons are very limited how much they can carry. By definition, then, they kept pack animals. Mules were the best, but expensive. Oxen were not that reliable. That didn't work very well. And they just didn't make that many roads. So in the first 50 years, I'm talking about the first 50 years of the 19th century. So by 1850, only 10,000 miles of roads. And most of them were not permanent, not macadamized. Most of them were nothing more than basically wagon runs, which for storm washes out. But this is the important thing we have to do. To figure out the cost to ship goods, they call it a ton mile. And the cost to ship goods a ton mile by 1850 was 15 cents. It had halved. Don't compare it to cost today. 15 cents a ton mile was really expensive. And the price had halved. So it's cheaper. But roads are more expensive. Roads are significantly more expensive today. But roads are very flexible. Yes. Say it again. It was called McAdam. After a guy named Mick Adam, literally like it sounds, and it had an eyes. And that was basically just crunch up rocks and then roll them over and over and over again. I can't remember what to call it, a steamroller, but they roll them, roll them, roll them. They're still there. It's a remarkable thing, but really expensive. You know, today's roads are much cheaper and faster to produce, but still very expensive. I should add, we don't have this qualm about the national road and the federal government paying for it. The federal government pays for most of it. Montana could not even function as a state without the federal government because they built all the roads. Just there'd be no roads. There'd be nobody here. There'd be no business because there'd be no ways to either get your goods to market or buy products and ship. The federal government made Montana. It's really funny. I see when people in Montana say, I hate the government. Just imagine if we didn't have it. They can't. So, because we've always had it. We'll see. But wagon, very limited. So roads, relatively inefficient. Canals, I know it's hard to see it, but canals. And canals were almost all at this time a product of state aid. Now, canals are very difficult to build and dig. To dig one wide enough, it's very difficult. Remember, these all had to be done by hand, but still, 3,700 miles of canals were built that first 50 miles. But look at the cost per ton mile. This is actually rounded up. It's less than a penny a ton mile on average. Water can take more goods. It can take the weight. Water is much more efficient to ship goods to this day. You just go to one of the big harbors, go to Long Beach Harbor and see one of the big container ships. You know, they weigh 150,000 tons. The things are massive. They're bigger. Well, they're about the same size as a super carrier, aircraft carrier. And these huge things to ship goods. Why? Because the water takes the weight. It's slower, but it's cheaper. That's how come we can get so many goods from China. Even with the tariff, it's still relatively cheap to ship, even though prices are starting to go up pretty dramatically now, but that's another story. Almost all of them were state aid. So New York, the new state of Ohio, and eventually it's going to be Indiana, Ohio. But remember I told you Cincinnati, I go all the way around. Now it's connected to New York. Up the Hudson, Erie Canal, Lake Erie, down the river. And so eventually it will be connected by water to Chicago. All connected by water. Goods can be shipped. Now, the United States did not have as many canals because we have a lot of rivers. So not as many, but still they were very important. You go to Britain, there's canals everywhere. France, Germany, canals everywhere. And some are quite wide. In fact, these companies have cruise lines down the canals. They're kind of these long boats where you kind of just go down the canal and go to little towns in like southern France. I know people down there. I don't know if I'd want to do that, but they had a great time. And they got to be flat because they're going to be pulled by mules on the side of the canal. And how do canals go either up elevation or down? What do we call it? Incredible bit of engineering. A levee's more like on the side, like a dike, water from flooding. You know, have you heard of a lock? It's a lock they use to either go up like a stair step or down. And I'll show you a little bit more about a lock when we get to the panel. Locks are really cool. The C&O Canal goes through Washington, D.C., and part of it's done by the Park Service now. So you can ride a little, basically like a little keel boat, small, narrow boat, and go, they kind of pull you down, then you go up the lock, and go up, kind of see the process. It was neat. I'll tell you one more thing, since it's flat. It's all flat here, except for the canals where you have stairs and off on the side. This is done by the National Park Service now, and it's for hiking through the Appalachian Mountains along the Potomac. And if you want a really good hike, it's really awesome. Especially if you don't really want to be too strenuous and stay flat. It's nice. Walking through these beautiful mountains, and you go off the side. Just a little bit of a recommendation. Much cheaper. I should add, they started building canals all over Britain and France. Hey, that's when they started seeing all these fossils. I mentioned that before. Darwin's. Whoa, things are different than we thought. It's all coming because of the Industrial Revolution. So, the most famous of the canals was our capital. It was built in a canal, and so we can actually tour it and travel up and down. Come on. How do I do this? Somehow I shut it off. Let's start over. The Erie Canal. And this was all done by state funding. And so up the Hudson. And the Hudson is still tidal. And it's so very wide up to almost Albany. So it can be big. Whoa, big. Ocean going vessels go way up the Hudson. And then the canal across to Buffalo, New York. Hop on the Lake Erie, go across, you notice the little tributary canals. There's still some of it used. Some are due for cruises or for more for hiking, but the Erie Canal system. And that's the best example of direct state aid for business. This is for business, for the merchant class. This was Hamilton's vision or things like this. And not making a value judgment, that's both good and bad. It's certainly going to concentrate wealth in some people's hands, but at the same time, that's going to create commerce, more business activity, jobs, etc. And so here is a picture of it. It's completed in 1825, and you can see it pretty well here. The mules pulling keel boats haul so much more in a way, about 20 or 30 times more than a connoisseur. And so much cheaper, slow, but much cheaper. Hey, everything moved at 3 miles an hour anyways. And you'll notice this guy and the family of pigs, and look at that pig. Look at the size of that monstrous pig. Think about it for a second. And I want you to ponder something. Feral pigs have reached Montana. That thing is coming for you. Don't forget. I'm actually not kidding about the feral pigs. They're here. It is state law to kill feral pigs, and now it is a crisis because they're coming. You know what I'm talking about when I say feral pigs? Don't mess with pigs. They're very smart, and for good reason. They don't like humans. Moving on. We have to add one more technological element for the transportation revolution, and it fits kind of with canals, and that's steamboats. The first workable steamboat was Robert Fulton, who looks about 13 years old. Remember what I told you about portraits? 13, maybe 12. They called it Fulton's Folly because others had tried the brand new steam engine, put it on boats, and to make a cylinder to withstand the pressure of the steam being released, it was really difficult, and they had a bad tendency, the bigger they were, to explode. This worked. And once you had a workable steam engine on board a ship, all of a sudden now upstream, you go upstream so much cheaper. Wind did not matter as much. Ships could get bigger, and they could start to become made out of 1850s iron, by 1880s steel. That means they can become more weather resistant, haul more goods. Oh, and think about what that's going to do for war. Steam engines would revolutionize transportation. But I kind of mentioned that with canal, just to fit in there. So if you see this picture right here, the dark blue, these are rivers that are navigable. You can navigate these, and then the green's canals, the red are roads, but most of them are just a little more than tracks. Do you notice the thing about the sections? Do you see it? You see which section had the most canal? Pretty obvious, isn't it? There's more rivers, but I'll talk about why the South was fearful of federal government and especially paying taxes because it had to deal with slavery. And so look about 1830. The red is 1 day. little bit. The world's getting smaller. Can move faster. But now, half as long to get to this little tiny place called Chicago, which is hardly more than a dock on Lake Michigan at this time. And getting faster, mountains. Still pretty slow to move goods. Let's jump to the big railroads. Railroads were key. Railroad, that would be the culmination of this revolution. Railroads would make the United States. The rocket was the first workable steam engine. What country made the first steam engine? Yeah, Britain. The Industrial Revolution, Britain, that's the rocket. The first one to work in the United States was by Peter Cooper. They called it Tom Thumb. And this was, it was a basically whiz along from Baltimore, or from Baltimore to about 2 miles outside of Baltimore on the first tracks. And it could whiz along at about 3 miles an hour. But still, it set the stage for what's coming. The rocket could go along for 25 miles an hour. So there's a few workable rockets left. This is one in the train museum in York, England. They have a massive train museum there. And I love this picture. You can see the carriages. They kind of look like, to me, I think of like a stagecoach. That's where you held the water, turn the steam. This is a little bit inaccurate, but I had to fit it into the museum. I tried to get a picture without somebody in it. And this guy walked in right before I snapped the picture. I have no idea who this guy is, but actually worked out pretty well because now you get the idea of the scale of the train because he was 6'9". I made that up. I'm sure he was average height, but that's a picture of the rocket. And it could go, 10 miles. It could probably maintain a speed of 25 miles an hour. I know that seems incredibly fast today. Think about it. Everything was at 3 miles an hour except for short bursts. And now you can go 10 miles that fast and haul a lot of goods, a few tons, blew people's minds. So the first thing they did on this is sell them like a carnival lines. But they were already using rails to transport goods like out of mines, pulled by mules. So they would have cars made for rails and then pulled out. But now they have something that will be pulled by a machine that is more efficient, faster, longer lasting, doesn't need to be fed, die. And that's railroads. So 1830, the first tracks are going to come to the United States. Here's on the Baltimore, Ohio. This is a photograph of late 1840s. And then what they did is they would take photographs and they would literally by hand paint them. You might have seen some old pictures and it looks kind of fuzzy. Yeah, they would paint them to try to get rid of some of the imperfections, or the shutters had to be open so long to be blurry. So they tried to paint out the blurs, which actually made them look more kind of artificial and cartoonish. And they would, it was the first passenger train, really looks like stagecoaches there. Wood, doesn't burn as hot as coal. And people would ride on top and they would scream and howl. The soot would come off and catch their hair on fire and be all part of the fun. But transport goods. And this would revolutionize the whole world. And the first companies that could get an extensive rail network had such an advantage over every other country. We as in the United States, still living off the wealth created from that advantage. Even though the United States is not even close to the industrial power it once was, and falling behind really fast. Like, wow, are we falling behind? We're still living on the wealth, at least some people are. So, 1830, only 13 miles of track. Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. But here's the big decade. This is the decade you have to get, 1850 to 1860. Look at that. 22,000 miles of track was built in one decade. Unbelievable production. This is world-changing railroad production. And look at the ton mile by the end of the 1860s, or by the end of 1860. 3 cents a ton mile. Sure, it's more expensive than the canal, but railroads were more flexible, significantly faster. Didn't have to worry about droughts or floods or anything like that. Railroads would change the world. Now you can ship goods faster, more efficiently, but not just that. People, news, information could be moved. So even cat-propelled trains would be used. And this would revolutionize these. Okay, I don't know who made this, but I love it. All I know is it's in Russia. Because their hybrid cat steam designs are still some of the most advanced in the world. That's how they won World War II. Right? You didn't know that? The cat railroad, armored cat trains? Okay. So railroads, the other important thing is this, really have to understand this. Railroads are technology and industry. They're both. I'm sorry, transportation and industry. Sure, it's going to get goods cheaper to market, but here's the biggie. Think of everything you need to build a railroad. That's factories, machines, technology, iron, steel, wood, leather, coal, oil. You want to talk about what's going to happen to most of the forests in the United States in this era. They're going to be cut down because of the trains. And you have to have really technical, well-trained individuals running it. You're not going to have any yahoo who's going to say, hey, why don't you go build a bridge across the Mississippi River in St. Louis? Anyone can do it. Just go and build a bridge. Have fun with it. You need trained engineers. Those didn't exist. They didn't exist. You have to literally create them. So much of the specialization that many of you are thinking about if you decide to go on to secondary ed and college are going to come because of railroads. You need communication. You need that. And you have a bridge out. You have a train coming this way and the bridge is out. Train coming, bridge out. Do you see a problem? Or for that matter, how to get information about shipping prices and everything else. Telegrams coming. Telephones coming. All because of trains. It created new ways of business. A small individual can't possibly afford the loss of building an entire rail network. And so you need corporations, new methods of finance, banking, new organizational structures. Railroads change the world. Also, think about this. I'll give you that in 1 second. Look at that map now. Look at the section where most of the railroads are built. So before the railroads were built, 1833, just about had Civil War. That close. Didn't happen. No railroads. 1850, that close. The Civil War. Blowing the whole thing up. Look how many railroads. The hell of Civil War did come. 1861. Look at the railroads already built. None here. Almost. This would be decisive for the victory of the United States. Still almost lost, but the U.S. probably could not have won without the railroad. The U.S. would have lost the Civil War. South would have won, U.S. beat them. Same in 1830. 1833. Both times. This would be decisive. And it's not just because of the transportation. It's because of the industrial backbone the railroads needed. That an industry would be the same kind of industry that would be needed to make cannon, to make rifles, etc. To win the war for the United States. So, now look at it by 1859. This is shipping goods still. Passenger trains actually move faster. You could be in New York and to Chicago, now exploding into becoming a big city in a little bit over a day. Incredible how fast they go. Some of these steam engines by 1859 could go 70 miles an hour. By the end of the century, steam engines could go 120, 130 miles an hour. Some up to 150. Only for about 30 miles, then they need more water. That must have been remarkable to see. In the United States, because of our allowing our infrastructure to become so deteriorated, trains today are slower than trains in now, if you go to Europe or Japan or China, they're a lot faster, but that's another story. One day. So think about it. You can ship your goods, or for that matter, yourself. You got better prospects in Chicago, you can get there. Not only that, think about it. Inbreeding is going to drop. You can go meet people that aren't related. You get married to people who aren't your cousins. That's a big deal. That's really going to change this whole kind of genetic pool. Our railroads. I'm not being facetious on that. Okay, a little bit. Inbreeding dropped. Railroads. So, this is the result of the transportation revolution. Shipping prices have. And it's an example of massive government aid, most at the state level, towards business. Massive, unprecedented government aid. It'd be almost impossible to imagine having any kind of commercial activity without the road network we have today, just like the rail network today. So it's going to open up new markets. If you make goods, now by 1855, you make goods in Connecticut, you could sell it to virtually any place east of the Mississippi River. And by 1900, you could sell it anywhere, anywhere in the continental United States. And with steamships, it's going to lead to, by the end of the 19th century, unprecedented globalization that would not be seen again until the 1990s. There'd be a couple of wars that will get away with that. But look at the prices. So this is not a very precise graph. They want to get, because it's so much more expensive for roads. But then I do really like this one. This is upriver. How much it costs upriver. Steamboat. And then soon it doesn't matter. And look at the cost. Downriver. Railroad rates drop dramatically. Railroads are really expensive. There's a big cost in the front, but then it becomes more efficient. Not only that, if shipping costs drop, all costs drop. For any manufacturing, for any commercial activity, costs drop. If costs drop, that allows you, if you're selling a good, if your costs drop, you can drop your price you sell and still make a profit. If your costs drop, you can still make a profit. Transportation costs is one of the biggest costs for any kind of entrepreneur function. And so you can get raw materials to factories and not be exceedingly expensive. Before the transportation revolution, factories made no sense. It was too expensive. You start seeing in Britain, they started using water networks and they dug all these canals. There's lots of reasons financially why they were able to do it, but it happened there and then went to the United States. And then you could get manufactured goods to market at lower cost. Revolution. Now, all of a sudden, you could be miles away from where production happens and you can buy stuff. You can go buy stuff. Our concept of what a store is starting to be created. By the end of the century, you'll see something crazy called a grocery store. Don't wait to have something like that. Just wait till refrigeration hits. So we can go and buy stuff. So stuff that we used to have to make with our own hands or had to be bought from somebody in our vicinity, this little group of people that kind of relatively self-sufficient, now you can go buy. How long is it going to take for you to lose how long does it take for people to lose their skills they once had to make everything? I told you this once before when I talked about what happened to American Indians with the fur trade. How long does it take for you to lose your skills? 1 generation. 1 generation, it's gone. So what happened? More and more, not overnight, but families became consumers. They used to have to produce everything, they became consumers. What do you have kids for if you're not a good little family, little workers? It's really expensive. So families become consumers. This is crucial. So by the end of the century, pretty much survival, your survival is dependent upon somebody else, and you have to buy it. You need money. You have to purchase it. You've gone from relatively self-sufficient to we're dependent on somebody else, and everything's for sale. Everything is for sale. It's a radical new world. Now, we look at this world and we go, yeah, that's our world. everything's for sale. And I mean, everything is now for sale. But it wasn't like that before. And all this happened after the Constitution, which is kind of remarkable, after our system of government, so to speak. So let's get to the next big step, interchangeable parts. Another term for interchangeable parts will be called the American system of industry. Now, we're going to have two American systems of industry in this unit. Don't blame me. One was dubbed by Europeans odd by New American Manufacturing in 1855, the other by Henry Clay. So, before you write down Muskets or Eli Whitney, let me add one thing about interchangeable parts. When I mean interchangeable parts, I mean the individual parts are made by machine. And that's what we have to get down. Made by a machine. Does everyone got that? Interchangeable parts means the parts are made by machine. Parts are made by a machine. Now, before, things had to be made by very skilled craftsmen, and every piece was unique. Most famously, muskets. We can all understand a musket. That's a brown bess musket, the kind that they used in the Revolutionary War. It was all done by hand. So you have to have a lathe. You do it by hand to make the stock, hand drill, the barrel. It has to be relatively soft. Iron or relatively soft steel, which is also really hard to make. People really skilled craftsmen. And if part of that musket broke, which happened all the time, especially for hunting rifles, they're really, really technical and precise, so they would break all the time. You either had to hand make that part or throw it away. Every part was unique. That's part of the reason why muskets were so expensive. And that's why they use these really inaccurate muskets, because they were more durable than anything. But they're much tougher. So an army wants reliable, cheap muskets that are also easy to fix. And that's where Eli Whitney came. Has anyone ever heard the name Eli Whitney? He's one of the most famous Americans of this era. Now, it's for another invention that he kind of stole. We'll get to. Has anyone heard Eli Whitney? Yeah. You know what he made? Does the name sound kind of familiar to some of you? Good guess, though. Have you ever heard of the cotton gin? We will get to the cotton gin. Yes. But he was still president, Thomas Jefferson. And he wanted a contract to make muskets. And he told Jefferson, I can make muskets. Machines can make the individual parts. So they make the parts, and all we have to do is assemble them. So we won't be reliant on the few skilled craftsmen. There weren't a lot in the United States. We can make them faster, and the piece breaks, we can put it back together. Jefferson, who loved this kind of stuff. One of the myths about Jefferson is that he didn't like technology. He loved technology. He just feared all the machines owned by one or two people. That's what he feared. But back to this. So Jefferson said, show me how it works. And so Whitney said, I have the machines. I'll come back in 2 weeks, show you how it works. Whitney came back with a barrel full of the parts of 10 muskets and went into Jefferson's executive office in the old executive mansion, pre-White House, and dumped them on his desk. And Jefferson was really just, wow, that's really cool. The idea of machines making this. Supposedly, he jumped on the desk and started grabbing the pieces. He was so excited, like a little kid. I know this doesn't seem like that big of a deal, interchangeable parts. It blew Jefferson's mind. And he just grabbed the pieces and could assemble a musket. Any piece. Disassemble them, mix them up again, put them back together, and it still worked. Blew his mind. And Eli Whitney got the contract. And this is his Springfield Armory. Using water power, they began to assemble muskets. It took about 15 years to build the factory. You want to guess why it took so long? It's because Eli Whitney had lied through his teeth. He did not have the machines. He had, some of his people working with him had an idea. He had them all handmade and carved to all fit together, and then lied to Jefferson. So it was a total scam. But it worked, and Eli Whitney getting this contract would encourage others. But here's why it's so important. And timing. Timing means everything. It's right at the end of Jefferson's administration.
The War of 1812. The blockade would encourage industrialization just when Eli Whitney was looking for investors. Perfect time. If it would have been 5 years earlier, Whitney probably would have won under. By the way, Springfield Armory still functions. Now it's not water power, obviously. They make more like experimental weapons there. But it still functions, especially for the military. All right, so Eli Whitney. And what do we call these machines? The machines that make the other parts are called machine tools. And these are the most valuable pieces of machinery in all the world. They make the parts. So they make the manufactured goods. So this is at Harper's Ferry. This is the drill. All these belts are turned by water. Harper's Ferry was an armory too. I'll talk about Harper's Ferry more down the road. They still work. Sometimes if you go there, the federal government shut down, but Park Service has employees. Every once in a while, they'll make a Mustang. It's really kind of cool to watch these parts and all these moving parts out there. You can see why there'd be a lot of people working there with 1 or 2 fingers back in 1850. But this, I didn't get a good picture of the lathe to make the barrel, so I took a picture of some older picture. All water power, machine tools. These are the most valuable pieces of machinery in the world. And these are the tools, the machines that operate the factory system. And there's a term for it. This is called capital. And this is a word you have to know. Now, people will use the word capital a lot today, and they actually are talking about money. And capital really isn't money, except for one simple thing. You need money to buy the capital. Unless you have a bank. I guess your capital is the money. But that is the means of production. So the machine tools are the capital. And they're the most valuable pieces of capital in the world. So the building that holds it, a warehouse for these machine tools, the term for warehouse in India is called factory. So the factory that we stole from them, that would be the beginning of the factory system. By the way, what do you call then the person who owns the machines? Huh? The capitalist. The capitalist is the person who owns the machines. That's the capitalist. They own the means of production. Hey, new world now. Think about it for a second. We just said now that families are now dependent upon other goods. That means goods have got to be produced more and more by these factories, owned by somebody else. That means you've got to go there to get a job. You can't make this on your own. You can't go home and make a car. You can't make a computer at home. I know somebody saying, well, but I know someone who constructed a computer. Yeah, they bought the parts that were made by machine tools and then put it together. You go make the entire thing. Tell me how it is to make a semiconductor. I want to find out how it feels to make a microchip in your basement. You can't do it. You got to go to the machines. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new world being created because of this. Oh, what country, to this day, even though their advantage is slipping, makes the best machine tool? Now, Britain made the first ones, and then for 100 years, the US made the best. And then the US just kind of abandoned it. Not yet. Germany. Germany still makes the best. But China is catching up so fast, it's absolutely unreal. What happened in China is unreal. They are now the biggest economy in the world by purchasing parity power, and they are, wow. We've let that slide, especially in like renewable energy like solar and wind. It blocked us. It's so much cheaper than fossil fuels. It's wow. It's going to be really something down the road. So let's get the factory system. Last thing for today. Did you have to go a little bit early? You can't. So factory system. So the factory system is going to be created. These are all factors of the Industrial Revolution. This is our world. scientific history and economic history just fascinates me. So it's got to fascinate you, given a choice. You can also see where I think it's most important. So production and labor is now centralized in one spot. This is a totally different world. So you have a decentralized population, people living small little towns and people on small little farms. Hey, that world's gone. That's not our world today, is it? It's centralized and one owner. Now that owner was a person, but more and more now it's an entity. It's an entity, a creation of humans called a corporation. And all production under one roof called the factory system. And you got to go there. And if everything's for sale, everything, and you can't make it yourself, you got to find a job with somebody who has the capital. So what the example, or you starve. And if they're not hiring, you starve. It's a brave new world. It's our world today. And just wait till I tell you about the wage system. You'll find out. So textiles, tomorrow we'll pick up right at textiles. Sound good? The wage system. Oh, the test. I still have a few left to grade, but I have them mostly done. I have typed in the grades, mostly A's and B's, so that's very good. There will be an opportunity to do one or so of the short IDs. That's ending. No, we're not going to make. I was hoping, but we're not going to. Wait, when's it recorded? Is it in the quarter? Is it Halloween? Yeah, I'm not. There's no. No, maybe there'll be maybe a quiz to do. I was kind of hoping to get there, but I'm not going to make it. Halloween is the end.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Halloween's on Friday, isn't it?
Get what? You had to go climbing in a costume? Any fall? Any broken legs? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll better try to do it. Oh, that's.
That's why we can't dress up. That's so weird.
You know, it seems like little kids, but more and more adults seem to be getting back into many Halloween.
Yeah. Text you from the building.
Have a great day, everybody. Let's see you. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay. One step, one more forward.
I don't know what we did last Tuesday, Wednesday.
Very good.
I got like super sick.
And you're gonna be more susceptible to being there. And then
Yeah,
once you get around these kids, once you get around students, it makes it worse.
yeah, because I like wasn't really around, like, I just got hit with like all the germs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you able to check my keys and check what we have? Government. So they're not. You got the papers done. See how you're doing. Sound good? And purposely class. You're trying to keep it in essays. And I also make a copy of everything I have.
I'm pretty sure I turned in for chapter 7 and it was completed.
What do you
2 out
have?
of 20,
Which book ready to get?
2 out of 20.
Well, because someone forgot to type the zero. That's the time. And I was typing down the thing. It is I hate proofreading on the computer screen. I'm terrible at it.
It's too much. I turned mine into when I'm.
You got a 2 also?
I got to.
Let me check. Okay, they're very well. You could have someone got the 2 and then I'll check it. I promise I'll check it, but now I have to give you a negative. You'll get the points, don't worry.
So I was gone for this and I forgot to turn it in yesterday. Thank you.
See you. Hi, guys. Yeah.
So you got a 0 on? No. Someone got the 2, you got the 0.
Yeah.
But anything, then I went back through and I'm terrible at it. I blame society. All righty then. My speaker won't work now. Okay, while you guys are doing this, I have to send an email. I know, very exciting.
So you're about to.
So I should